Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Namaste, hello everyone. Welcome to my course on interior design supported by NPTEL. And today we are at lecture number 10. We are going to discuss the summary of week 2 and what all the discourse was and what kinds of contents we covered during week 2, and which was primarily focusing on the principles and elements of interior design, space making elements, certain trends, concepts and schemes, specifically focusing on lighting, color, finishes, etc. And then interior design drawings and representation techniques along with some references. So we started our discussions this week by understanding the principles and elements of interior design, and then also trying to understand how they come together and help us achieve a certain composition within the interior spaces and varied projects that we work on. So we started with the principles. Since this is a summary, I'm not going to explain everything again, but just like a quick recap, there are 7 important principles which we discussed through examples: balance, unity, rhythm, emphasis, scale and proportion, contrast and detailing. Then we also talked about the elements of interior design such as space, line, form, light, color, texture, pattern. And then we try to understand the composition. And when we try to compose a space, or just like a painting that we do on a canvas, or we compose a frame for photography, same way we are doing a composition within a space. Now that composition could follow chaos, or it could be orderly, or it could be order in chaos. There are ways in which designers work, and a well-defined composition helps the interiors to be very fluid and in harmony with all the fragments. So all the parts to whole, they just sort of flow in together as one composition. When we try to understand composition, we also try to understand what could be a centerpiece within the interior composition, how it could provide dominance within a room, when one enters, and that dominant product or dominant object that could be, aligned with the center, or they could be two different things and so on. Also, what is the interrelationship between different objects and how they are put together to, create a holistic image that the human brain can perceive, and how do we achieve principles like rhythm by placing objects together, in relation to one another. So those were the kinds of organizing principles within a composition that we tried to discuss. And how to achieve harmonious interiors, these elements could be connected through texture, color, shape, or some kind of a recurrence or repetition. Then moving on to understand composition, focusing on the contrasts and accents. So when we talk about different objects within an interior space, they could either be friends because of certain interrelationships between them, or they could also have a relationship with regard to contrast, even though they are not matching, but they may have some kind of a juxtaposition or interrelationship. Then we try to understand space making elements, which are very, very important when we talk about interior architecture, and what are these elements and how do they play a role in creating or enhancing a space. So we saw this kind of chart, and the interior and architectural elements that make the space or enhance it, they help in creating a space, are called space making elements. This is what we discussed in detail. And there is this classification that is done, broadly speaking, to understand space making elements, specifically in the context of interior architecture. So architecturally speaking, there are some very, very crucial building elements or space making elements For interiors, of course, doors, windows, openings, partition, etc. And then there is a classification which is called ornamental, and it could have surface finish, color, artifacts, objects that could be decorative or utilitarian. We also saw another classification where the space making elements are put in these three orders. So, structural elements, building elements, and interior elements. And we saw specifically the interior elements that have been defined over here. And starting from the structure to the interior surfaces, what is this entire range and what all are these elements. So we also went on to discuss each element in detail with examples. I've just put a summary of that. So we saw walls and what are the anatomy of walls. So it could be straight, tapered, curved, etc. Then columns. So they also have typological variations, obelisk, a column itself, a pier, a pilaster. So all of these and what are these, why they are technically these different classifications, and what are the examples of these. Also a little bit on the evolution, starting with the Egyptian columns, then Greeks, and the 5 orders that we still follow, and there is a great value, and we still read a lot about these, and we discussed all these in detail. What are the attributes or qualities or characteristics when we talk about the building element column? So it has, these attributes like centrality, verticality, directionality, rhythm, etc. And through these attributes and by these virtues, it does define a space. It does achieve a certain function. There is also a certain kind of perception within space, some kind of a direction that column provides, and so on. We saw the other element, which is the partition screen, and how it is very, very useful, especially for the interior design projects. And it is called as a room divider also, or sometimes a dividing screen. We saw some images and examples of each of these elements. The floors. So floor is again a very crucial building element. It's a horizontal plane and it provides reference, for the entire space, and how different kinds of floor finishes can be achieved, and what is the purpose or function of floor. Different kinds in terms of anatomy, specifically focusing on the form. It could be modulated, unmodulated, a natural floor or a man-made, so depending on the kind of material we are choosing. We saw also an example, the application, and we saw the example of Sangat, Ahmedabad, and what is the role this space making element is playing in this very, very famous architectural project. Then moving on, we saw furniture and how its primary purpose is to support various human activities within interior spaces such as seating, sleeping, etc., and how it can add a lot of value to our interior spaces. Again, we saw some examples. So, of furnishings and furniture. We saw some of the projects, some images. Then interior landscaping was another important element that we tried to have a look at. And, it has a lot of role on the, well-being of the users. And interior landscaping is becoming very, very popular. We see a lot of airports and, huge terminals and all kinds of projects which are encouraging interior landscaping. So again, some examples. Looking at the anatomy, we saw again some, baskets or categories. So green gardens, living walls or vertical gardens, waterscaping, floating indoor landscaping, stonescaping. So all of these are possible. We saw another example, focusing on interior landscaping, the Ellison Institute of Technology, and we discussed a bit about the interior landscaping and its role and contribution in this project. And then we discussed the entire sort of a floor plan and how the interior landscaping is done so elaborately and what all it does to the space. We also try to understand trends, concepts, and the profound role of lighting, color, and also the importance of finishes, specifications when we talk about interior architecture projects, and how these are very, very scientific and not just based on some kind of decor or romanticism, but yeah, like what is the physics of light and what is the chemistry of colors and what is the science behind all these concepts. So this is like example of lighting and how lighting can really impact a space, not just functionally but also creating an inviting and appealing atmosphere. We understood a bit in terms of the technical details, what is visual field, what is focus vision, central vision, peripheral vision, and why it is important to understand this. Yes, we tried to understand three main types of lighting, specifically focusing on interior architecture. So there is ambient lighting, there is task lighting, and there is accent lighting. We tried to understand that. So ambient or mood. Then there is an impact of lighting on the color and texture also. So even those concepts need to be understood. And what is the role of these put together? Then color, how it is one of the most fundamental and influential aspects within the interior architecture domain. And again, we saw some examples. And this kind of these kinds of illustrations which talk about color relationships. So violet here, the red one, yellow, green, and then we have zones like red, violet, blue, violet, red, orange, yellow, green, and blue, green. And what are these interrelationships and why they are important to be understood, specifically when we talk about space making. So we had those kinds of discussions also throughout the week. Another important aspect whenever we talk about interior architecture projects, whenever we talk about interior spaces, it's always about sensory experiences, it's about psychology, it's about well-being. So when we talk about the colors, there is an association, with a lot of emotions and mood and psychology. So those kinds of interesting discussions we had. Again, some examples when we talk about furnishings we see over here. They could be fabric, Chanel, velvet, faux fur, rubber, any kind of clothing, textile material, rugs, all of those. So these are the types of furnishings, very popular ones. Curtains, cushions, bedding and mattresses, some wall hangings and tapestries. I was just talking about rugs, some kind of chair coverings, your bean bags, carpets, even doormats. So all of these could be, a part of furnishings, and they also play a very important role in value addition and functionality and aesthetic of your interior spaces. And the furnishings could be simple soft furnishings or decorative soft furnishings. You can see over here two examples. Then we went on to understand the technical drawings, how interior design projects are communicated on site for execution through drawings and representation techniques. So we saw the example of a technical sketch which gives the major idea and the scale of design. And then what are the types of drawings, technical sketch being one of those, and then the mechanical drafting, and of course the CAD, which is the computer drafting. This is an example of CAD drawing and how it's like very, software aligned and like a proper line drawing with uniformity and spacing and everything. Also, we saw some drafting media such as, the tracing paper, and these are still common. I use them a lot. Help us, achieve concepts and do drafts. There is also something known as a vellum or a tracing vellum that's also used quite often. And then of course the graph or the grid paper, very, very useful, always helps in giving us the idea of scale with the help of this grid, and on that we can make sketches and drawings. Then, different kinds of drafting sheets, what all are the available styles. We also saw, different kinds of signs, symbols, notations, dimension methods. We tried to understand what are different types of lines and what do they represent when we use them on drawings. So all these kinds of classifications within the line typology. These are interior architecture material symbols, some of the material symbols that we saw both in section and elevation, and how can we represent a brick or a concrete block or stucco or plaster, all of these. Again, some more graphic symbols which can help us understand an exterior door versus, an interior door, what is a pocket door, etc. Yes, more of these, whether the window is casement window or, it's a sliding window, all those kinds of symbols again. And interior door, sliding door, panel door. So we see them in elevation plan section, all three media, and then we try to understand graphically how can we represent these interior architecture elements through symbols, and we can superimpose them on our drawings, technical drawings, and showcase these details. More of these, so single casement, double casement, and how do we open, where does the opening go, inside or outside, show that with the dotted lines. Also understanding what are the different kinds of plans and what are the typical scales on which we produce them. So starting with the site plan and foundation plan, floor plans, very very crucial for interior architecture projects, elevations of course, very important, different elevations, building sections, details of the construction, details which are on a zoom in scale and with more elaborate details in the sense they can be executed on site. Interior details, also the service part, the lighting, the HVAC, plumbing. So these are different kinds of plans and some kinds of scales that are typically followed for commercial drawings and residential drawings. We understood also how things work on site and what is the checklist, when we produce these drawings. So we have to go by these checklists, starting with the border and title block, scale of the drawing. There has to be a drawing number. We have to, of course, showcase the north arrow so that we can understand the orientation of the site and understand the details better. Exterior walls, interior walls, patios, porches. If there are openings like windows and doors, how do we, put them on the plan? So we have to just do this checklist whether we have put all these details in place or not, and whether anything is missing or not, so that before sending it on site, we are sure that nothing is missing. And ceiling changes, other kinds of details like arches and soffits, etc. Window numbers, door numbers, so there is a window schedule and door schedule. We will see that also. And if there are any chimneys, if there are staircases, so directional arrows for showing the direction up and down. And also, the wheelchair access, or if there are any standards of universal accessibility that has been followed, and we would like to highlight that through drawings. If there are very, very particular details regarding fixtures and appliances and equipments, especially regarding to kitchen and bathroom, etc., those kinds of details. If there is any sort of a built-in interior feature, or if there is any kind of a customized detail that we have put in place, then what are the dimensions, notations, all of these have to be sent. This is one example of the floor plan. We had a detailed discussion when we were talking about plans during one of the lectures in this week. We did talk about notations and why they are important, especially for interior design drawings. Also dimensions and what is hierarchical dimension, placement, and then the overall dimension, wall dimension and opening dimension. And we saw some examples of that, how the dimensioning is done. And then more examples, the dimension techniques for plans here, like floor plan. Some example where we have to do the dimensioning, for an angled wall or wall at an angle. If there are any curved objects or, some kind of circular objects, and how do we do the dimensioning for that. Dimensioning for frame buildings, for masonry buildings, interior elevation drawings, and why they are very, very crucial for interior architecture projects. How do we sort of, show the details on them along with dimensioning, of course, in a hierarchical manner. And also the material is highlighted over here. So line drawings, rendered drawings, all of that. And then, what are these typical interior elevations and what all do they showcase? So those kinds of discussions we had. Again, there was a checklist which was discussed because it has to be followed when we talk about the interior elevation drawings, and here is the checklist like we discussed for the plans and all the details, different vertical components, openings, schedules, notations, dimensions, all of those details. This is again, another example where we see the drawings and we have all the details, material, specification, finishes, dimensions, so all of that. There is another drawing here which is put together, and through these examples we try to understand how for interior architecture projects it becomes very, very crucial, to do the dimensioning properly, to do the mentioning of proper materials, finishes, specifications, because it is so detailed. When you execute on site, you would require all kinds of details. So, what kind of pattern, what's the starting point to put that particular piece, and what is the center line, how you are aligning it with your overall elevation, and all the details over here. And we do mark some reference points like this is the roof ridge and here this is earth, so all of that. Then what are the section drawings and how we cut this plane, and then try to show these material details in cross section. So it's like vertically cut through the space or the object. Some examples we saw for the section drawings, and here also we try to understand how we try to showcase materials like this is a plywood, does it have a lacquer finish or not, does it have a varnish, and what is its thickness, if there is a particular make that we have followed or a standard size from the market that we have taken, if there is a molding, let's say of oak or any other timber. All of those details go on an interior design drawing. Whether this material is Korean or granite, is there an epoxy bond over there or some kind of another adhesive or a resin that has been used. So we have to put all those in place in a lot of detail actually. Some more examples we saw of these interior design drawings, and then we tried to understand the level of intricacy and detailing that goes in, completing and delivering these drawings. Checklist for section drawings, again, we saw a lot of these details which need to go on site. And also there are some drawings which are specifically meant for, details. And these details can be referenced within your larger drawings, which could be plan elevation section, and then we can focus on these details, like zoom in and then create another set of drawings with details. So some of the examples of that and how we show these details. We try to understand the importance of schedules when we talk about interior design or interior architecture projects. And when we talked about schedules, we saw door schedule, window schedule, and so on. So this is one example of the door schedule. And how this scheduling is done. We saw some of the examples of that. And of course, we mark it on the plan and then we show these schedules here as, additional details. Continuing with the door schedules, graphic representation. Another example, this is for a residential project, and we see how the scheduling is done in detail. And this is the typical information that is usually required when we prepare door schedules. So we saw these in elaborate manner. This is a commercial door schedule, and so showing some more examples visually. This is window schedule, again marking on the floor plan and then creating a schedule over here, and along with the remarks giving it in detail for execution on site. Graphical symbols, and again the schedule. Then there is interior finish schedule, which is very, very crucial. Which room, which building element or space making element has what kind of finish. So that scheduling. This is another example. Then we have an FF plus E schedule, which is furnishing, furniture and equipment schedule. This is also interesting. So we saw some examples of that. Now, once we have done this week 2 and we have tried to understand these important aspects about interior design projects, what we are going to do next is we are going to thoroughly understand different kinds of spaces when we talk about interior design. and what are their classifications and what are the different nuances of each one of those. So we will discuss that. Some references I have put together which we discussed throughout the week. I'm sure they will be useful if you want more details other than what is appearing on the slides due to the time constraint. More of websites. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time.